This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Tuesday. It's December 5th, 2023. I'm traveling today, so I've got a new setting, and thank you for joining us at the Truth Central. We're doing podcasts every weekday. Today I'm going to start with some news that's coming out of London, which is pretty amazing. The London Parliament had before it a bill on emissions. We're going to talk today at length about this climate movement, because there are some very important developments going on in London and in Dubai with the climate meeting going on. But this is particularly important. I'm going to feature it right now. The British Parliament voted against the Prime Minister Sunak's proposal. It was a late vote on Monday night. 38 members of Parliament voted against the legislation that was bringing in the government's net zero vehicle mandate. The legislation would have enforced an 80% target for electric vehicles as a percentage of new car sales by 2030. And Rishi Sunak, who is the prime minister, did not have the votes to carry the measure. This comes after the Net Zero Security Group wrote to the prime minister on Saturday. They said if the cost of buying and running an EV is going to become cheaper than gasoline and diesel cars, mandating them with this law is unnecessary. This law is anti-consumer, anti-choice, anti-motorist, and will leave the public poorer. Car ownership could once again be restricted to the privileged few. Now, this is a significant rebellion in Parliament because the Tories' majority, which is the Conservative Party, is now dependent on getting this anti-net zero coalition to go along with them. And in fact, if Labour doesn't support the conservative movement and the net zero group is opposed, the conservative government, the prime minister, can't carry measures in Parliament, which is one of the real tipping points in a parliamentary system in which you could risk a change in government. So Henry Wilkinson, who is the Net Zero Watch head of policy, also had a very important statement, which I'm going to read. He said, this is a very significant vote, which shows the strength of the feeling on the backbenches. Conservative members are clearly deeply skeptical about the whole net zero agenda, but they don't have a government which reflects these views. I welcome Rishi's change of tone on net zero. Prime Minister had been saying, let's get softer about it. He knew there was opposition, but these needs to be followed with action, a change in policy. He needs to stand up to the civil servants who keep pushing through these draconian net zero measures. Now, that really hits it squarely, because what's happening here is what's happening around the world. And that, in other words, you've got a woke bureaucracy that is pushing an agenda of net zero, because fundamentally they are neo-Marxist and they're anti-capitalism. The agenda is getting exposed for what it is, which is a depopulation agenda. It's an agenda to make people poorer. And so this vote in London, which just really happened a few hours ago, is very important in terms of a change in tone internationally against these climate crazies. Okay, now what's going on in Dubai is also interesting, because Saudi Arabia said it's absolutely not to oil phasing out, which is a proposal that the Pope issued. The Pope, in his speech, which he didn't deliver, he was sick, but he was delivered for him, the Pope said we should go to phase out hydrocarbon fuels altogether. So Saudi Arabia's energy minister slammed the door shut to agreeing to phase down hydrocarbon fuels. They continue to call them fossil fuels, although no fossil ever produced a barrel of oil. But Saudi Arabia said absolutely no way. Now, the major oil producers are also coming out very vocally. This is a story from Reuters today. World's major oil producers spurn fossil fuel phase out in net zero push research. So this comes from Dubai. None of the world's major oil and gas producing countries have plans to eventually stop drilling for those fuels, despite many having pledged to reach net zero emissions, according to data shared with Reuters on Tuesday. Okay, that's today. This is we're reading from Dubai, which is already nighttime Tuesday when it's daytime here. Again, Australia, it's about 10:30 at night when it's about 6 o'clock in the morning in New York. The Net Zero Tracker, an independent data consortium, including Oxford University, says findings between the gap between target countries that they've set for avoiding these disastrous levels, they say, of climate change, and the real world plans to continue producing carbon dioxide emitting energy. Of course, Reuters is politically correct in wanting there to be wind and solar to do everything. But in fact, what we're coming out of Dubai, instead of more unison, that we have to accelerate this agenda to implement wind and solar, the exact opposite is happening. The extremists are getting rebuked by reality. So here's Politico. Politico's reporting, open secret at climate talks. The top temperature goal is mostly gone. Researchers injected a sobering finding into the global climate negotiations Sunday by saying the world will likely fail this test to get no more than 1.5 degrees centigrade before the end of the century, but that 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial revolution levels. It's all nonsense. Carbon dioxide is not a direct function. How much is emitted? In other words, the carbon dioxide, if you increase by 100 parts per million of emissions, it's not going to increase necessarily 100 parts per million in the atmosphere of carbon dioxide. It's a dynamic system and the mathematics don't work linearly. So what's happening is that, and of course, the climate hysterics are saying now we're going to have more terrifying storms, we're going to have drought, people are going to have to abandon parts of the globe because they're going to be uninhabitable. All these, climate porn, fear themes are coming out now. But the point is that India and China absolutely cannot go forward with a net zero agenda. They need to burn coal and they need to burn oil, and they're doing more of it. China's going to burn, and India are probably going to burn more coal than ever. And Germany is even saying that it is going to necessarily not be able to totally phase out coal, or perhaps maybe it's time to start up the nuclear power plants. Focus magazine. This is another article coming out of Dubai in terms of the conference. It's in German, but what it's basically saying is that Germany's economic minister has announced the coal exit may have to be postponed. Okay, and a Manhattan contrarian, Francis Merton, is writing an article today, Francis Menton, and I follow this pretty closely because they're usually good commentaries. But what they're saying here, this article is saying, I'll just read you the first paragraph. Let me welcome to the small elite club of critical thinkers in this post-energy transition. Okay, so one of the co-authors is saying, one of the people producing these columns are saying that the competent analyses of energy storage requirements needed to back up the intermittent renewable generation of wind and solar have been featured on this blog. And the point is that there's not enough storage capacity, and it would be very expensive to create the storage capacity and use up a lot of rare earth minerals. The subject would seem almost too trivial to cover in this blog, but everyone who's involved in any way in the energy transition game who has the slightest level of professional competence simply must be aware of the calculations that indicate that a modified surplus deficit calculation taught to water engineers to size reservoirs for meeting water demands when the water resources vary can be applied to indicate that energy will need massive storage in order to function as a full system without hydrocarbon fuels. So these are dramatic conclusions. and that there should be obvious to conclusions. If people knew the physics and knew the realities of energy, this nonsense of going 100% to renewables would end. Okay, so one more I'm going to comment, then I'm going to ask Chris to comment. The central problem for the Dubai Climate Summit is where are the trillions of dollars going to come from that are going to be needed in order to do this energy transition. So you have estimates, for instance, as the UN is convening, that the capital need cost estimates from the Energy Transitions Commission are $110 trillion. McKinsey says it will take $275 trillion, okay, which is roughly 2.6 times the total global GDP for 2023. Deloitte estimates in the mid-range of $5 to $7 trillion per year through 2050. These are mind-boggling numbers. The magnitude is hard even for the average person to really comprehend. Even the smaller estimates to 3.5 trillion annual investment from 2023 to 2050 is just outrageous in terms of how much money would have to be spent to go to wind and solar at 100%, and it wouldn't work. The Inflation Reduction Act contained about $369 billion in subsidies for tax breaks for green energy investments for a 10-year period of time. That's only 1/90th of the total global investment required during that time, according to the Energy Transitions Committee. It would take almost 250 IRA-sized tranches of money to meet the levels of investment envisioned by the McKinsey estimate. So no wonder the cost of raising capital has more than doubled since the McKinsey estimate was published in early 2022. The magnitude of the real problem becomes clear. That's why you've got investors pulling out of the wind farms, where you've got solar panel farms that are just going idle. The problem is that this technology doesn't work on the scale needed. And we've been saying that on the Truth Central for months now. Chris, do you want to comment?
Here's something that's not discussed a lot. Why in the heck is the COP28 conference, the climate conference, the one where they're trying to get rid of oil, being, let's put it this way, taking place in uh, one of the major portions of the oil cartel itself? I can probably give you or float by a couple of reasons. One of them is the UAE is Dubai's, well, the expensive Dubai, obviously. So it's not easy for a lot of people just to stay there, and the rich elite can just go by their own. Also, I believe that they're not too keen on too many protests there as well. I believe they limit protests in the area. Am I correct on this?
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then to create the image that, hey, we're for the clean energy, although we're selling you the stuff that you don't like, or we're open to having the critics here. I have a strange feeling this is a sort of a rather, let's just say, a rather interesting partnership, if you think. And most of this is because of optics or more than anything else.
Well, it's what you have here is a war of optics. You've got a war of ideology. This is not science. This is ideology, and the ideology is driven by a neo-Marxist agenda, which is fundamentally depopulationist. I've demonstrated that in the book I wrote, The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change. And what's happening worldwide is I think people are waking up to the reality of what the woke generation want, how they want us to live. And people are finally saying, no, we're not going to live that way. Now, that's a major setback for this globalist agenda. I want to cover a couple more stories here today. We're going to go kind of in rapid fashion today. This may be a slightly abbreviated presentation, but I want to cover two or three quick points. Israel's got a system of large water pumps, and they're now planning to flood the networks of tunnels under the Gaza Strip with seawater. That could destroy the tunnels and drive the fighters from their underground refuge. And that, I think, is going to be the kind of measure that Israel's going to take. Israel's reached a point of loss of patience. Israel's reached a point where they're going to have an existential threat. They want to eliminate Hamas, and they're going to do everything they can to eliminate Hamas. I don't believe Israel's going to stop, regardless of the international pressure this time around. The attack on October 7th was just too horrific. So right now, And there are videos, and the Wall Street Journal is playing videos of how these tunnels were used to hide weapons, to launch surprise attacks across the border. It's really, the Japanese did this in the island warfare in World War II. It's a complicated underground system that is difficult to penetrate with, and soldiers fighting it find that they're in a crisscross of networked tunnels that don't necessarily interconnect. One tunnel network may be unique to itself. And again, the idea of just flooding them and ultimately destroying them, first flushing everybody out of them, and then going in and destroying them, is probably what Israel's going to do. Because you can't allow this tunnel network to continue to exist. The terrorists will just come back and use it again. Now, a couple stories also on the what's going on in terms of the price of gold. And I want to just see for a minute what it is today. Yeah, gold's at $2,031. They've done some downward correction, but this is now, I'd say, 4 or 5 days where gold has been trading above $2,000 an ounce, which is a major sign that gold could break out and really start a bullish run. And I've been predicting that here for months. Chris, if you'll feature the book, I want to tell people one time quickly how to get this new free book about the coming global crash and how it's going to create an historic gold rush. I'm going to repeat that number, 1-800-519-6268. And if you're new to Swiss America, also talk about this Walking Liberty $50 offer as a premium for first-time customers of Swiss America, that you can get up to 250 of these coins. Fill out the form on thetruthcentral.com. You can go up to the sponsors and click it down, and with the sponsors you see there Swiss America. The Walking Liberty $50 offer comes up. Fill out that form, talk to Swiss America, and you can get the free book, and you can also get up to 250 of these coins at the price that just about what they're worth in silver. I encourage people to do that. Okay, now in terms of the economy, there's several stories coming out today that again are focusing on the fact that the Bidenomics are not everything Biden's claiming they are. Let me just pull up one or two of these stories here quickly. Okay, hold on. Well, the central banks are themselves on a historic binge of buying gold, and they're buying up massive quantities of gold and have been doing it all year long. Let me just find a couple stories here. Right now, the tension is whether or not the Federal Reserve is going to keep interest rates high. And the problem is it cannot really lower interest rates without risking inflation catching on again. The story I wanted to cover is this, that China has got two problems. They have a debt binge, and they got a collapsing real estate sector. Now, Moody's yesterday downgraded China to negative. That's China's sovereign credit rating went from stable to negative. While the revision does not signify Moody's will imminently downgrade China's credit rating, it does increase the odds of persistently lower growth, and troubles in the property sector do not diminish. So the rating agency, with 1 month ago, also lowered the U.S. credit rating to negative, was very concerned that the government and state firms would provide fresh financial support to weak regions in the country, including weak banks. And this would pose risks both to the United States fiscal stability as a nation and China. It's a deteriorating outlook, comes as the latest dating in the housing data, the world's second largest economy, both China and the United States. You're seeing massive property problems, including the commercial real estate in the United States and worsening home sales. Home prices have now plunged the most in 8 years. All these signs indicate to me that we are going to have a hard time in 2024 staying out of recession. And I'm encouraging everybody to watch these economic signs very carefully and to take appropriate actions, which mean reduce debt. The value of your currency in terms of purchasing power is likely to continue to diminish. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. We're going to wrap up today. This is December 5th. It's Tuesday. I always like to say in the end, God always wins. God will win here too. We're going to go through some dark times and a judgment of God. I encourage everyone in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14. Let's get down on our knees and ask God to forgive us for getting to this point of having taken God out of our schools, out of our hearts, out of our families. 2 Chronicles 7:14 is the formula. We're admonished there that God will hear our prayers and heal our land. I do believe we are at that point, and I do not believe that God created the human race to fail. But God will rebuke the human race, and I think that's in the process of happening. Thank you for joining us in the Truth Central. We're broadcasting every weekday. We'll be back tomorrow. God bless.